Tony, awakening the entrepreneur within. What's that all about?
All right. Chapter five, which was the final chapter of the book, was about awakening the entrepreneur. In the later phase of my corporate career, Gary, I noticed a trend in terms of the type of person my employer was hiring. And it was the more entrepreneurial type person rather than the employee person who'd been in the company for 20, 30 years and was sort of holding on to the status quo. They were bringing in these young entrepreneurial type people to not just work in the business, but to work on the business.
Mm-hmm.
The distinction between the two is that so the person working in the business is performing a job role, but doing a set of tasks that keep today's wheels in motion, Gary, if you like. The entrepreneurial type is potentially dismantling outdated processes that may no longer be delivering on the customer process, upgrading certain activities and systems in the business to become more efficient and effective. So that person is seen as more highly valuable, and it's what Seth Godin calls the linchpin. They are not a cog in the wheel of the company, they are the key part that makes the wheel turn round. So that is what I would define as the entrepreneur. And I sought to become more entrepreneurial in the later phase of my career. And that what that did for me, Gary, in terms of empowering me was it made it very hard for my employer to terminate my services. So the way I did that, I became a risk management specialist, facilitating risk assessments, consulting with senior executives on how to better manage their risks so they could still achieve their strategic and operational business objectives. And when I'd finally had enough of my corporate days and I asked for a redundancy package because the company was going through a stage of redundancy, they declined my offer, saying, "No, we need your services." So, in one way, it was a blessing. In another way, well, I didn't get my redundancy package, but it convinced me on the power of becoming entrepreneurial in terms of adding so much value to the company, both in terms of my risk management skills combined with my mentoring of others,
Yep.
that it made it damn hard for my employer to get rid of me.
So, who is it incumbent upon to awaken the entrepreneur within?
I believe it's important for all of us to become more entrepreneurial. So at the moment, Gary, to bring it back actually to the elephant in the room in terms of the employment world today, is, as you know, is AI, which is threatening a lot of jobs. And I say to a lot of people, well, how can you leverage AI to help you become more entrepreneurial? That shifts the dynamic because the employee type person is threatened by AI. The entrepreneur uses it to become um, more powerful and leverages it. So, in an organization, you could look at AI as potentially reducing some of the mundane, repetitive tasks and moving you up the value scale to become more entrepreneurial, performing the high value tasks. So that's what I saw in my organization was they were moving themselves from in the marketplace from the commodity level. The commodity, Gary, is easily replaceable. There is more supply than demand. There's more cogs than there is need for them. Whereas the entrepreneurial type person, there is a greater demand than supply because a lot of people won't think like an entrepreneur. And what do I mean by thinking like an entrepreneur? The entrepreneur is not maintaining day, they are building future wealth for an organization. And when you position your career as a future wealth builder, you become highly valuable. Think of people, for example, like Steve Jobs. He wasn't simply doing a task in an organization, he was creating future wealth through mobile technology, his creativity, that sort of stuff. So he becomes an example of making yourself really hard to get rid of because he added so much value to an organization that employed him.
Wonderful. It's been a great interview about your 5 chapters. What would you, as a concluding comment, make about chapter 5 or maybe overall?
Well, in terms of chapter five, because I get the question a lot. What do I need to be? What do I need to do to become more entrepreneurial? And I say to people, remember, entrepreneurialism is more of a mindset than anything else. And I share the quote from Henry Ford. And I'd like to share that if I may. Henry Ford said, I'm looking for a lot of men with an infinite capacity for not knowing what can't be done. If you go into an organization and you have people telling you, no, we can't do it this way, or we can't deliver this by that time frame, then you're an employee. The entrepreneurial type minded person is always turning the impossible into the possible. And if you can apply that in your career and in your life, that becomes a very powerful mindset to a more prosperous future.
Been an exhilarating interview. Tony, thank you so much. I know your viewer and listener right now would be excited, and I'm sure if they haven't already read your book, will do so. So thank you so much, Tony.
And thank you, Gary, for a compelling interview also.